I made a $700,000 mistake. And if we're being completely honest, it's probably closer to $1 million when you factor in the opportunity cost and lost revenue. But let's stick with that 700 because that's what I can actually track. That's what we paid people in salaries over about 2 years of work that either I ended up doing myself or we got to pay for twice because then other team members had to pick up the slack on that, or that just straight up didn't get done. And I'm not talking about one bad hire, I'm talking about multiple bad hires. 6 people that I had to let go of in 1 year. 6. And after firing that 6th person, I had to sit down with myself and ask, who's the common denominator here? Me, unfortunately. So here's the pattern. Because as you know, you've heard me say this before, success is about pattern recognition and learning to pick up on the indicators of other people's success, of your own, of the things that are happening consistently in your business that are causing you not to have success. Life is about pattern recognition. So here's what kept happening. I would hire somebody. They'd talk a big game in the interview. And I say interview in air quotes because I didn't really have a super good process. These were people that I knew, past clients, people in the space, referrals. They'd tell me all about their ideas, all the things they thought we could develop, all the experience that they had. And then they'd onboard and it was like, you didn't tell me I had to keep breathing. I didn't know I'd pass out if I stopped breathing. You didn't tell me that. Not self-starters, not actually skilled. And I didn't realize that I would have to be breathing down their neck. So let's break down that $700K. Number one, their salaries and work that they didn't do. My time doing their job because they couldn't. Other team members being paid to pick up the slack. And then the opportunity cost. Clients that I turned away because I knew I couldn't handle more volume with the team that I had. Lost revenue from things that didn't get done, projects that were supposed to be moving forward and never got completed, never got done properly. Again, that's $700,000 in salaries alone over 2 years. And that's not even counting the opportunity cost. Like I said, the clients, the revenue I didn't generate because I was too busy managing a dysfunctional team or doing their work myself. And if I factor that in, we're talking close to or potentially over $1 million. So why am I telling you this today? I'm going to walk you through everything I learned from this multi-year long disaster that I didn't even realize was a disaster when I was in it. When to hire, who to hire, how to manage, how to fire people. Because the biggest lesson I learned is that most of the time, you don't need a new team member. You need a better, cleaner system. Before we get into it, and now that I've made myself sound like a moron, I'm Kenda, the founder of Lainey Media, and we are the only social media and marketing firm in existence. We scaled to over 7 figures our first 12 months in business, and our content system is responsible for over $323 million in revenue across 3,000 clients. Content and marketing and neuropsychology, that's my forte. Management, that has been a hard won lesson that I am still learning. So let's start by talking about the hiring mistakes that I made and why I made them. Number one, and I feel like you know what I'm going to say, I hired people that I knew without a real interview process. I didn't interview people because they were people I already knew. They were past clients. They were people I'd met in the space. They were referrals from people that I trusted. And I thought, well, I already know them. I know that they're good people. I already trust them. This will be so easy. Wrong. Knowing someone socially or as a client is completely different from knowing that they can execute in a role on your team. So what do I do now? Instead of interviews where people just talk about themselves, because I've had 1 or 2 or 12 of those, I am now leaning more into tests and work product. My application is no longer tell me about yourself. It's more so, here's the problems we're facing. How do you suggest that we fix them? That's what I want to know prior to bringing anyone into an interview process. And I've also learned that I have to be more assertive in these conversations. If someone's saying a lot of nothing, I have to call them out and force them to go deeper. And if they can't work with us. And I'm also looking way more for track record, not potential. I have to be honest with you. I used to hire the way that most women date for potential, for what I saw in them, for what they could be. And having potential is great, but they also need to have a proven track record. And I can tell you, I will be checking references now. I will literally call everybody. I am so aggressive about it. I don't care. I'm done. And I've had to be really strict with myself. This is not easy for me. I have never identified with the people pleaser label. I never would have put that on myself because I can be ruthless when I need to be. I will cut people off without an explanation. I am relatively good at setting boundaries. And so I thought because I had those traits that there's no way I could be a people pleaser. I didn't realize that being afraid to hold somebody accountable and being afraid to provide feedback so that I wouldn't be perceived as a bitch or hard to work with, even allowing people to, this is more clients, not team members, past clients, allowing people to speak to me in a certain way and continue to try and have a productive conversation with them. Those are also hallmarks of being a people pleaser. But because I wasn't afraid to be like, no, I'm not doing that, I'm not interested in that, I just assumed that I wasn't a people pleaser because I didn't have the tendencies that I associated with it. Because, like I said, I was able to say no, I was able to set boundaries, I'm able to cut people off if I need to. So I didn't think that that was me. And as I've learned and matured and gone to therapy for my PTSD, that turns out is something that's very common to have when you were a child with cancer and chronic medical conditions. Had no idea. As I have begun to learn about that and process that, I have also learned some more things about myself, like the fact that just because you can tell somebody no doesn't mean you're not a people pleaser. It doesn't mean that your nervous system doesn't go into a fawn response and not allow you to stand up for yourself or provide feedback to people. Those are also parts of people pleasing. And so I have had to be really strict with myself because, to my credit, I am good at when I acknowledge that there is an issue, when I acknowledge that I have an issue or am an issue. Once I'm aware of it, I will go out of my way to work on it, to counteract it. And so now that I'm aware of these things, I feel comfortable talking about them because I've actively held myself accountable for a consistent extended period of time to where I'm able to do these things a bit better. The second mistake that I made was assuming that everyone would care as much as I did. Here's the problem. That's not really a problem, but it's a problem. Our second hire is still with us today. She's amazing. It's like she's inside my head and she genuinely cares so much about the business, about our clients, about the work. And so the problem that I had is that I thought everyone would just be like that. And because I would never act the way in someone else's business that these people did, it never occurred to me that people might take advantage and just straight up not care. And that is something that I've also had to learn in business, is that you need to learn to adjust and account for the circumstances that you would never put yourself into. For me, I would never track down my business coach to scream at them and tell them that their strategy isn't working just because my boyfriend broke up with me. I personally would never do that. And so it would never occur to me that someone else would do that. But alas, need I say more? The same thing goes for hiring a team member. Just because you would operate a certain way in someone's business, just because you care or you would never do some of these things that would cause the business problems, you can't assume that everyone else thinks the way you do. That's something that my dad always told me growing up. Don't make the mistake of thinking that other people think the same way that you do. And it didn't click for me until after I had to fall on my ass a few times that very much applies to hiring, building, and leading a team. Other people will show up in ways that you could never even imagine. And honestly, that goes for better or for worse. Just keep in mind that not everybody is going to care about your business the way that you do. And that's not even a character flaw on their part. It's just the reality. It's your business, not theirs. And so what I was doing wrong is that I thought that if I just made the company a fun place to work, people would be bought in and they would care as much as I did. That's kind of true to an extent, but I did it wrong. I was so afraid of being labeled as a bitch or being labeled as hard to work with that I wouldn't give people feedback or hold them accountable. And I thought I was creating a positive culture. And really, that was just me avoiding difficult conversations. Because what actually ended up happening was people would skate by, doing the bare minimum. And I would then take extreme ownership a little too far and internalize everything that went wrong as being my fault. Maybe I didn't communicate clearly enough. Maybe I didn't explain what I wanted well enough. Maybe I didn't communicate the deadline. Maybe I didn't do enough training. Maybe the system wasn't good or clear or easy to use. Maybe the SOPs weren't as clear as they needed to be. Maybe I'm just trash. And so I would step in and fix it or redo it or just do it myself. And now I literally repeat to myself all day long, raise your standards. That's my mantra that I've had to give myself. Raise your standards. Because even now, when I have to give a team member feedback, I have to just say that to myself over and over and over and over. Raise your standards, raise your standards, raise your standards. Because what I learned is that the people who care, they actually do want the feedback. They want to be better. And the people who don't care will just make excuses and get defensive. And that's how you know who to keep and who to let go. Another mistake that I made on the topic of excuses was that I believed every single one. When I did try and give feedback, it was met with excuses. And I always just believed them. They didn't know. Oh, I probably didn't communicate that clearly. Maybe I didn't explain the deadline well enough. Maybe it wasn't well documented. And I blamed myself for everything. And excuses, they usually happen when people think that they're going to be in trouble. So my approach is I'm not mad. I just want to understand what happened so that we know what we can do differently next time. Our team is allowed to explain themselves. And I may say, yeah, okay, all of that aside, here's my issue with that. But they are allowed to give their reasoning, and I won't take it as an excuse the first time. After that, it's a different story. So when do I stop giving chances? I stop giving chances when I have number one, documented the issue. And this is a framework that you can go through, and you can even do a little self audit if you're struggling with a team member. If you have somebody where you're like, kind of takes me more time to make them do it than it does for me to just do it myself, let's go through this framework. Number one, have we documented the issue? Document the issue. Number two, over communicated what needs to change. So we have communicated via text, we have communicated via voice note, we have communicated this on a Zoom call, we have communicated with direct feedback on the work product, etc. Over communicated. Number three, have we held them accountable? Did we set a due date on that task, or is it something that we mentioned in passing? Did we also send a text and get confirmation on that they understood what that was going to be? Did we have a time to circle back with them and review, or did we have a date for that content or whatever it is to be reviewed? Yes or no? Did we meet those dates? And I'm not talking about micromanaging here. You shouldn't be messaging somebody every single day to get them to do their work, but there should be key points where you have accountability built in. For me, one of those things that I do is I go through at the end of the week, I have a view and click up where I can see every task that's overdue. And I simply, at the end of the week, I take a screenshot if there's overdue tasks and I send it to the group chat and I say, hey, please clear out of all of these out by end of day. That's it. It's not hours and hours of my time, but it's one quick little check and balance to have in my process that I do consistently. It takes me probably 30 seconds, but it has helped us be able to use our project management system better because it's cleaned up. It has given me that built-in accountability. And then if I see something that's overdue, I can jump in there and be like, hey, what's the status on this? It gives me that time to review and go a little bit deeper if I need to. And if not, if I can see that there's nothing overdue, everything was checked off for that week, then there's nothing else for me to do. Number four, have we gotten the verbal confirmation that they understand what to do, how to do it, and why they're doing it? Why they're doing it is key, because you would think they're just telling people what to do and even how to do it, that they would do it. But people need to understand the impact that it's having on your organization. What is the outcome that that task or that thing provides for the company? That's important. And then 5, if they still don't meet the standards, then we're done giving chances. Our contracts also include KPIs. If those aren't met for 3 months, with my support, of course, then I'm done. And I move quicker to fire people now than I did before. And my rule is this, because data and information and tracking aside, if it's not a hell yes that I want to keep this person, it's a hell no. And if it's a maybe, it's also no. If I'm kind of on the edge where I'm like, I don't know. I mean, they're kind of doing it, but it's not. I mean, I've provided the feedback. I've gone through all of this. It seems like they don't care. And we've had conversations with them. We've put these different things in place. We went through that framework that I just explained. If it's a maybe, then it's a no. The other thing that I did was that I hired too many people too fast and before I had systems in place in the way that they needed to be. Now, in my defense, I didn't know. This was my first time hiring a team. I didn't really know what systems needed to be in place. My systems ran great for me and for the couple of team members that I had. So I thought we were doing great. And then I hired too many people too fast. And I also hired multiple people before I had the systems in place to fully manage them. And it wasn't just that I was hiring the wrong people. I was hiring people I couldn't even manage effectively because I didn't have a system to plug into. So they came in, I'd try and onboard them, and it was chaos. They didn't know what to do. I didn't have clear SOPs. I didn't have a way to track their work without micromanaging them. And what happens when you hire without systems? You end up doing their job for them because it's easier than just explaining what you want. Or you end up double paying people, paying the person that's supposed to do the job, and then paying the other team members to pick up the slack when they don't. Or you end up with a bloated team that's not actually driving revenue forward and they're not productive because no one knows what they're supposed to be doing or how to do it. Now, I will say knowing how to do it, because I realized that a lot of this was a problem and put some of these things in place because I'm the queen of scrambling and figuring it out in the moment. And it was still a conscious decision on their end not to do the work, but I digress. This was still on me. It could have been smoother. I now have very robust SOPs that I update honestly on a daily basis. I have a much more dialed in system. I would say it's probably 90% of where I need it to be, but 90% is pretty good. It's functional and it's not the biggest burning fire right now. And I got to chase that down first. So the system is much more dialed in. I can have a bird's eye view. I can track progress. Again, I don't have to micromanage people. And I am now forcing myself to give feedback even when people are doing good work, not just when things are going wrong. The key to this now is that I've learned not to hire until the system is in place. And if you don't have a documented process for the role you're hiring for, you're not ready to hire for it yet. And again, giving that feedback when people are doing a good job, there's always improvements that can be made. What I would do in the past is I would try and set up some review, some feedback for myself. And when I was like, well, it's good enough, I would just check it off as done because I had a million other things to do. And this is one of those things where I'm like, raise your standards. You have 15 minutes because you already blocked this time off. You have 15 minutes to review whatever that is. And even if it is good, even if it's 80% of what it needs to be, which as we know, you only need anything to be 80% of the way there, because 100%, by the time you get to 100%, something else is burned down. That's just the reality of running a business. But I force myself to provide feedback. Sometimes it requires a little bit more brain power, but even when things are going well, I am reinforcing, you did this really well. I like this and this about it. In the future, I would also add this. It doesn't have to be big. A couple sentences here and there. The fifth big mistake that I made was that I didn't align on culture and vision. These people weren't aligned with my vision, my standards. But the thing is, they seemed to be at first. They'd say all the right things in conversations. They'd get really excited about the mission when I would talk about it. They'd talk about how much they cared, and then they'd onboard, and it was very clear that they didn't actually care. They were just saying what I wanted to hear. And so what do I focus on now? I am focusing on culture and vision just as much as talent. I don't care how skilled you are if you're not aligned with where we're going and how we operate. And I test for this. I don't ask, does the mission excite you? Like, why do you want to work with us? I ask questions that reveal how they actually operate. So like, I want to know, what is something that you went above and beyond with without being asked? What feedback have you gotten that you actually don't agree with? How do you handle that? Why don't you agree with it? Tell me about that. Tell me about a time that you screwed up and you dropped the ball. What happened? Why did it happen? How did you fix it? How did you make changes to make sure that it didn't happen again in the future? Their answers tell me everything I need to know about whether they'll be aligned or not. So I want to give you just some insight into what I wish I knew before I started hiring people. And this goes for coaches and providers, external team members. This can be applicable in a lot of different areas depending on what that quote unquote hire is that you are wanting to make. So The biggest misconception here is that hiring will solve your problems. Most people think, I'm overwhelmed, I need to hire someone, and then everything will be better. No, hiring doesn't solve overwhelm. Systems solve overwhelm. And so if you're drowning right now, hiring someone is just going to give you one more person to manage. It's one more thing on your plate when you're already drowning. What you actually need is to prioritize, then systematize and document, then hire. Part of the reason that you are overwhelmed is because you don't have a defined process that you follow every time. And if you're sitting here listening and you're going, well, Kenda, you don't understand because my business is no, I've seen the insides, the inner workings, the systems, the revenue, the metrics of thousands of businesses. The biggest business coaches and content creators that you follow in the industry have been my clients. And I have seen what the inside of their business looks like. I have had the same conversation with them about how custom and how unique and how special snowflake their business is. Business follows patterns. You don't need to strip your offer down so much that there's nothing unique and special about it. That's not what I'm telling you to do. But the pattern I see is that you are focusing in the wrong place. Trying to get another person to do your job is the biggest job of all. And your business feels very overwhelming because you have to use brain power every single time you do something because it's not documented, it's not systematized. The more custom elements can still be streamlined. You don't have reminders and a management system that allows you to not think about anything else but what is on your list for that day because everything else is already scheduled. We already have timelines set for those things. We already know exactly what day and what time those things are going to get done. So all you have to do with your brain is check off the tasks that are on your list for that day. That is what solves overwhelm. Hiring does not solve overwhelm. Systems solve overwhelm. Again, it goes back to having a defined process that you follow every single time. You're having to make decisions on the fly. You're reinventing the wheel every single time you do a task. You don't have clarity on what actually matters, and you're not spending your time focusing on revenue generating tasks. 50% of your to-do list could be crossed off just by deciding that you're not going to do it. You're going to need to reprioritize, and that does mean that some things are going to drop. That's fine. We just need to handle the most important things. That's what business is about. What is my core one thing that will make all of this easier? That is your focus. And you're never going to find the perfect solution, the perfect thing that will solve all of your problems. You just need something that is going to solve 80% of your problems. That's good enough. Move that direction. So prioritize. What are the highest leverage activities? What is actually moving the needle in terms of revenue? Being a founder and scaling is about putting out the biggest fire and just letting the rest of it burn. I have this conversation with my clients on a daily basis. One client in particular, she's always just like, tell me that it's not this hard. Tell me that it's going to get easier. Their business is doing about 1.2 mil, I think is where they're going to close out for the year. We'll see, especially after Black Friday. And we have a plan in place to double revenue next year. 2 mil to 2.5 is what we're shooting for. And she is always just like, tell me that it's going to get easier from here. Being between $1 and $3 million is the swamp of business. It is the hardest place to be. It's harder than being in those like 10 to 20K months. It is really, really rough because you are at the point where you have to keep everything running, keep that machine running yourself. You're still pushing that machine forward. You need to hire additional talent to be able to expand and to grow, but you can't quite afford to hire that higher level talent. And so it's a tricky place to be that it can be hard to navigate. Truly, what is going to get you out of the swamp? Like I say, $2 million is where businesses go to die. And I see a lot of people, this is a tangent, I see a lot of people in the online space that talk about, and they've been talking about for quite some time, about how they're at that like $200,000 to $300,000 month mark. And I'm like, wow, that is hard. I couldn't imagine being stuck there for 5 years. I would want to pull my hair out. I had a hard enough time a couple months. I'm done with that. I could not imagine having a business that plateaued around $2 million. That is the absolute worst thing that I could possibly think of. I would never want to run a business at that level for that long. Once you get to 5, once you get to 10, the machine is running. You have other people that are turning the gears in the machine, but you have the world on your back during those $1 to $3 million years. And wow, I sympathize for you. And how do you get out of that? You put out the biggest fire and you let the rest of it burn. Systematize, document the process. Create SOPs. The amount of times the word SOP comes out of my mouth in a day I should be put in jail. It's so annoying. I don't know how people deal with me. I don't know how my husband continues to live with me. The amount of times that I say SOP should be studied, but it's because I learned the hard way. Build it in a project management tool too, so you can see the workflow, the process, the SOPs, and have those SOPs intermingled with the process. Highly recommend ClickUp. Then you're going to hire. Once the system is in place, then you hire somebody to run the system. Do not hire somebody to build it for you, please. And what I mean by that is don't hire the person for that role to build it for you. Hiring like for a systems build, that's something different. There can be a time and place for that. That's not what I'm talking about. Now, the exception here is if you are so overwhelmed that you can't even think straight. Sometimes an hour with an advisor or a consultant is actually more valuable than trying to build the systems yourself or hiring somebody else to build the system. Get someone to help you see clearly and prioritize, and they can probably free up time for you in some different areas because they can look at your list and say, okay, we can cross these things off just by not doing them. But don't hire a full-time person thinking that they're going to save you when you don't even have the system for them to run yet. When you are actually ready to hire, here's the rule that I follow. If there's something in your business that is documented and systematized as much as it can be, and it takes more than 10 hours per week, it's time to start looking at what else in your business could probably be filled in with that thing to fill a role, to create a role for somebody. So let's say you're spending 12 hours a week on client onboarding. You've documented the process, you have templates, you have a checklist. It's as streamlined as it can be. You've automated what you can, but it still is taking 12 hours. That's the signal to hire somebody, because then those 12 hours actually are able to go down to 1, because then you just need to review what they're doing. But if you are spending 12 hours a week, it's not documented, you don't have templates, you don't have a checklist, it's not streamlined, it's not automated as much as it can be, and then you try and hire somebody to get them to do that, your workload just doubled. It went from 12 hours a week to 24. And so I understand it's tempting because you're like, oh my gosh, if I could just have somebody else do this for me. Wonderful. You're already doing that process. So document it and look at how you can systematize as you go through the process. Do that, run the machine for a week or 2, then you can hire. It might take you longer than that to get the process dialed in. But if you can save yourself a couple hours here, a couple hours there, that really starts to add up. And like I said, if it's different every single time you do it, you're not ready to hire. You are ready to systematize. Another rule that I follow religiously now: hire for things in your business that you are already doing, not to try and expand. Let me give you a concrete example of this with a mistake that I made. If you are not on YouTube, don't go hire a YouTube manager, 2 editors, and a graphic designer. Don't go hire 4 people for a department that doesn't exist yet. Start it on your own. Once it's a machine, even a bad one, then you can hire. Doing it once or twice and then hiring someone that's not integrated into your business enough to hire for it. I mean, you decide you're going to get on YouTube, you create a process, you run that machine, you post on YouTube consistently for 2 months, and that machine is working. You're following that same process every time. Then we hire somebody to hand it off to. Like I said, speaking from experience, that one was very specific. And I also want to hit home to the order of hires and when each role actually makes sense, because a lot of people, you would be shocked to know that a lot of people come to me between 50 and 100K months, and they're like, hey, I think I'm ready to start hiring people, but I'm drowning. So what do I do? 50 to 100K is too late to be hiring. You should have hired before this if you were strategic about it. And I know a lot of people are afraid to hire before they get to that range because income feels really inconsistent. Your revenue, your lead flow feels really inconsistent. Creating that consistency, I always say, like, you have no idea all of the things that good marketing will help your business with. It helps with your sales process. It helps with your lead quality. It helps with your delivery. It helps with retention. It helps with consistency so that you are able to make these hires. It does so much for your business. You have no idea. So if you're at 50 to 100K, you're kind of late to the game. So the first hire that I want you to be making, this is going to happen between 20 and 30K months. This is for online businesses specifically. The vast majority of our clients, 98% of our clients, are online business owners. We have our brick and mortars that we love, but for the most part, online. Because things are online, because businesses are able to be so automated, you can make it to 20 to 30 without team members. Again, it just goes back to those systems. I was around 20 to 30K per month when I hired my first closer, and I knew that me doing all of my sales calls just wasn't going to work because I had clients to support and I had to keep marketing going. So that's what I did. It was a good choice. Haven't looked back. Highly recommend. Second hire is either going to be delivery or ops, depending on your offer. If your delivery is eating all of your time, hire there. If your operations are a mess and things are falling through the cracks, so it's more about escalations and less of just like, I don't have time to deliver for all these people, I'm going to pull my hair out. For us, it was delivery first before operations because I'm more systems and structure minded. And so that's something that I held on to for a long time in our business. Third hire is going to be sales again. You're doing one of two things with that second hire. You're either moving yourself out of delivery or you're moving yourself out of operations. You're handing off the responsibility of that department. Pick one. Don't try and do both. Third hire, like I said, sales again. As you scale, you need more sales support. So either a closer or potentially a setter. If you don't quite have the call volume yet for another closer, you can hire a setter and then you'll probably need to hire another closer shortly after that. Depends on your volume. Fourth hire, delivery again. As your client load increases, you're going to need more delivery support. It's just a fact of life. Then maybe marketing. The caveat to this is that if for some reason you are not able to pull yourself out of delivery, or if for some reason you're not able to pull yourself out of sales, which honestly everybody can pull themselves out of sales, so it's more of delivery or potentially operations. If you cannot pull yourself out of one of those two things, you might need to hire for marketing so that you can sustain that delivery person and sustain your sales people, because you have to have that consistent lead flow. We work with a lot of clients that are in that 20 to 30K per month range, but it's inconsistent. Like 1 month they make 30, 1 month it's 15, another month it's 25, another month it's 9,000. It's like, what? It's a roller coaster. Or even like 1 month it's 9, 1 month it's 12, 1 month it's 6, 1 month it's 18. If that's what you're experiencing, then that's where someone for marketing, but that needs to be a strategic marketing hire where they're able to help you with strategy and even out that lead flow. Because if you're just hiring a social media manager, all of the ideation is still on you. The strategy is still on you, which is the gap that you have. So that's my caveat, maybe marketing sooner, but typically marketing is going to be the fifth hire for people. And I've always been really involved in my own content because that's what I'm good at. That's what I'm known for. So it makes sense for me to focus on what I'm best at. But I've had support there in different capacities from very early on. I control the strategy, but I get support with repurposing, editing, scheduling. I do have somebody now that's heavily involved in strategy. She's the person who does my content, same person that does client content, but I still have final say, final approval. So what are we not hiring for? Admin and ops. Too early. I hired and fired for this role multiple times because I thought it was my problem and it wasn't. Our business runs really lean, and the way I hired for that role just created more work for us. And then Soren, my husband, when he stepped in fully as COO, we never looked back. But that was at the right time with the right person. And so the mistakes that I see people making is hiring for ops because they're overwhelmed and they don't know what else to do, which is never a reason to hire somebody. Not knowing what else to do is not a reason to hire someone. But the thing is that being overwhelmed is usually not solved by an ops person. It's solved by having discipline for a week or two to get a handle on things and get a grasp on your data so that you can make good decisions. Don't hire to add to your business or to throw things at someone because you aren't able to regulate your emotions, raise your standards, and hold yourself accountable to documenting and systematizing your process. I know it's going to take you 15 to 20 minutes longer if you have to document what you're doing as you're doing it, but that's the first step. That's what needs to happen. I also want to talk about one metric that's important for you to be considering, because most people overhire. We were hiring for the right things at the right point in our business. The problem was just the hiring couldn't necessarily keep up with the growth. So I had new people doing new things that I hadn't systematized or documented yet because we're growing so fast. So revenue per employee. The standard that most people think is really good is $100,000 to $200,000 in revenue per employee. Our standard, because I've always overemphasized systems over hiring, and so that's why we'll be closer to 800,000 revenue per employee. So why does this matter? If you're making 100K per year and you have 5 team members, something is very wrong. And if you, even with a consultant, if they're like, we can't get you out of this mess, that is a fundamental issue with your business model. That's a deeper issue that you need to figure out. If you have to have so many employees that your revenue per team member is less than $100,000, that's not acceptable. I see this all the time, all the time. People making 10 to 12K per month with a team of like 5. In no world should that be the case. You're overhiring because your system sucks. I'm sorry, but that's what you need to hear. You're overhiring because your system sucks. And you might have a fundamental issue with your business model. I don't know. If you had a clean system, you could do 10K months by yourself or with one part-time VA. Most of the time, you do not need a new team member. You need a better, cleaner system. Now, I mentioned the different types of hires that I think you should be making, but I want to go into each of those in a little bit more depth, starting with sales hires. When I hired my first closer, I was around, like I said, 20 to 30K per month. And I knew that doing all of my own sales just was it was a non-starter because I had clients to support. Again, I was in charge of all of our marketing, and sales calls were eating up hours and hours per week. So I hired a closer. Now, the mistakes that I made, because I did hire and fire a few closers before I got it right, what I learned is that I had to learn how to train people effectively. Most closers come in thinking that they know how to sell, and maybe they do, but they don't know how to sell your offer to your audience using your process. So what I look for in a closer is this. I personally think that anyone can learn sales, but not everyone has the stomach for it. So what I'm looking for is, number one, emotional intelligence. Can they read between the lines? Can they sense when somebody's holding something back? Can they sense when it's time to stop pushing and give this person a break? Pull back, lead with that integrity in the sales process, and really be able to step back and do a pulse check there if it's time to stop objection handling. It's time to give them a free resource and exit the call. It's time to schedule a follow-up so that they can take a step back and kind of process the conversation that you've had. Emotional intelligence also comes into play with objection handling. Can you get a pulse check on this person and what they're saying and what they've told you, and know if this is someone that we can genuinely help, that we should genuinely be working with, and that's an objection you should handle, or if this is not going to be a good fit and it's probably better to just walk away. That's huge. That's really important to me. And that human approach to sales, this is number 2. I'm not interested in you using the scripts that you got from your course on my clients. We sell differently, and they have to be willing to learn. We sell in a much more nuanced way, because why would I not? I have such a good understanding of the brain, of what people need to be able to make a purchase decision. I know what the process that their brain goes through is to make a purchase decision. Why would I not use that information in my sales process? Why would I allow my closer to show up with these scripts that are pressure-based and pushing people into investments that they're not ready for, when I know how the brain makes decisions, and I could just have my closers provide that information to their brain and step back, relax, and enjoy the show? Why would I not use that? And then number 3 is experience, but malleability. I want somebody who's experienced, but I also don't want a bunch of bad habits to break. So I want somebody who's done it before, but is willing to unlearn and relearn. That's what I'm looking for in a closer. Setters are a little bit different. I'm looking for more expressive communication. So can they build rapport really quickly? Can they communicate an emotion through text? Because that's primarily what they're doing. Can they make somebody feel really seen and heard and keep that conversation flowing in a really natural way over DMs or over text? That's important. Number 2 is, again, emotional intelligence. Can they read people? Can they qualify them properly? Can they sniff it out when somebody is giving them a line of BS. And then that ability to read between the lines. Are they just booking calls or are they booking qualified calls? That is also very important. So if you're getting a lot of inbound interest, but you're spending a lot of time on unqualified calls, so your calendar is looking pretty full, but the lead quality is not 100% there, you probably need a setter. If you're closing your own calls and you're really good at it, but you just don't have the time, you need a closer. If you're bad at closing and you're losing deals, you probably need to get better at sales yourself before you hire somebody else to do it. Because if you don't know what good looks like, you can't train or manage a closer. You can't effectively give them feedback. Sales is a perishable skill. It's something that needs to be trained on consistently. You have to do it consistently. If you don't use it, you lose it. And as such, as the founder, you have to be able to, unless you're paying somebody to do it for you, i.e., you have your closers in some sort of sales training program. Our clients send their closers to our sales advisors' calls to work on increasing their close rate, increasing their share rate, drilling on objection handling, getting live call reviews and feedback on their discovery, the way they transition into the pitch, what their pitch actually is, getting live feedback on the DM conversations for their setters. And so unless you are paying somebody to do that for you, you need to be good enough at sales to be able to train and provide that feedback yourself for your closers. And I want to talk a little bit about the training with sales team members as well. This is my new process that I have learned through the School of Hard Knocks. What most people do is they hire a closer and they want to expect them to figure it out. They're like, here's the offer, here's the price, go close some deals. That doesn't work. So what I do now, I have them shadow me on calls first. They listen to how I handle objections, or this could also be another closer on our team that does really well, doesn't have bad habits. They'll listen to how I would handle objections, how I position the offer, how I ask questions, what questions or what things people say, and then how do I dig into those things. Then they will be co-leading calls with me. He'll handle part of it, I will handle part of it, or the other closer in this training will handle part of it. Then shadow them, listen and give feedback, do those live call reviews. And then when they're on their own, I'm still reviewing their calls. I'm still providing feedback on a consistent basis and have a reoccurring task in my ClickUp to sit down at the end of the week and randomly pull a call from the closer's calendar and review it and send them the feedback. You have to be willing to invest time in training. If you're not willing to do that, you're not ready to hire a sales team. You can tell I'm really passionate about training sales teams. So how do you actually manage your team? This is another question that I get a lot and I want to unpack it. So I briefly mentioned that feedback system that I use now. I give feedback on a weekly basis, and I think it doesn't always feel like feedback to my team probably, which I love. I just leave little comments. I'm the queen of sending a 30-second Loom video. It's like, hey, I want to make sure that these things are set in ClickUp, or I would have changed this and this is why. I give a lot of real-time corrections because I put more emphasis on what they're doing in the moment. I do look at data, I look at trends, but in the moment is when it matters. And I know that I won't be able to do that forever with my entire team, but for now, it's what I'm doing. And this works because feedback is most effective when it's immediate. If someone makes a mistake on a Monday and I don't tell them until Friday, they've made that mistake probably 4 or 5 times by then. And so real-time feedback means more real-time improvement. So let me give you an example of how I do this. One of the things that I have set up that I am proud of, and I love this little system that I have, it helps me with my anxiety so much. I have this quality control system for client content. I'm going to give you a brief overview of how it works. So when our team creates content for a client, it goes through this quality control process before it goes to the client. And then there's an additional feedback loop. So I review it. If something's off, I leave a comment or I send a quick Loom. I make the edit and I make sure I let the team know what that edit was, and so they can move forward with that. So like, this could be anything from the hook isn't strong enough. Here's why. Here's what I would change it to. The CTA on this doesn't tie to the offer in a clear way, or I don't like the way this is phrased. It needs to paint the transformation better. Let's use a different keyword, etc. This is kind of missing that symptom connection. Like, we're mentioning it, but we're not making the connection because of this. So we need to add this in. And so this one matters because the client doesn't see the mistakes, right? The client will, yes, have feedback on the content, of course, but they only see that more final finished product. But then my team gets the feedback that they need to improve. And over time, time, the mistakes get less frequent because they're learning what good looks like from me. The second part of that feedback loop is then after the content is posted, I'm then reviewing it again. So the content manager has to submit a form for every single client, one form per client every single week. And that includes things like the top performing videos, the lower performing videos, because if you post however many videos in a week, you'll have one that performs less and one that performs more. So they provide those for me with the data if they have it, depending on what type of client they are, whether they're editing their own or if we're doing it for them and then posting. So then we have their data immediately. And a couple just pulse check things. How do you feel about the content that you created? How do you think the client feels? Share some wins or feedback that you received from the client this week. So that way there's that secondary feedback where I'm reviewing before it goes to the client, and then I'm reviewing the progress and the actual performance of that content itself and providing that feedback and helping the content manager understand, based on the data, this is why this performed the way that it did. Here's what needs to be adjusted, so that they can start to adjust and make those changes before it ever even goes to the client. Now, I mentioned this previously, but I do kind of have I guess maybe like not a framework, but just a way I think about providing feedback without being the bitch, without being hard to work for, because I was so afraid of being labeled as that I wouldn't give feedback. And that fear cost me a good chunk of money, well over $500,000. And what I learned is that you can communicate absolutely anything in a productive way if you're willing to learn how to. So here's kind of the framework that I use and works like a charm. So I start with the observation, or I ask a question. Hey, I noticed this. Can you tell me more about that? Or, hey, did this happen and I'm just not seeing it? Or, hey, did you see XYZ? What are your thoughts on how this client is doing? I always lead with a question or an observation, and I get their response. I get their perspective. I hear them out, and I'm willing to do that. And then I will ask probing questions. And the probing questions are not, why did that happen? The probing questions are, so what do you think should have happened? What do you think we could have done differently? Do you feel like this is something that could have been prevented? Ask those probing questions to kind of get them to come to their own conclusion. And then if I need to, if they didn't explain it themselves, which oftentimes they do, then I explain the impact. Like, okay, so can you see how when XYZ happened, that caused this to happen? Yes. Okay. And do you understand why we don't want that to happen? Yes. Okay. So here's what I would like to see moving forward is XYZ, and then confirm the understanding. Does that make sense? Do you have any feedback on that? And I also will ask, like, do you absolutely hate that? Do you think that's a horrible process? Or tell me what you're thinking. Because oftentimes you'll tell somebody to do something and in their head they're going, well, if I do it that way, it makes this thing harder. But if you don't open yourself up to get that feedback, oftentimes you would never know. Sometimes I go to team members and I'm like, hey, what's going on with this? And they tell me, and I'm like, okay, well, I want it done this way, but do you hate that? Is there something I'm not seeing? And oftentimes they will tell me something that I didn't see or didn't know about that can easily be solved. So it's important to get that boots on the ground perspective. That's something else that I love to do on our all hands meetings, or when we do a quarterly planning meeting, is I have everybody do a start, stop, continue, because I think it's really important to get that boots on the ground perspective, because the people who are in the weeds every day with your clients, with the different systems in the business, they know more about it than you do. They do. And they're going to see things that you're not going to see just by looking at the higher level data. And so I always ask, what's one thing you think we should start doing? What's one thing you think we should stop doing? What's one thing that you think we're doing well that we should continue doing? That's very valuable. Now, that's not necessarily an in the moment thing, but if you do that consistently, you can be making these incremental improvements. And a lot of times you'll get information directly about a problem that you needed to solve that you didn't even have. And here's my other thing that I'll give you. I think this is really valuable. You should take this and use this. I will periodically ask my team, what makes your job hard? What makes it hard for you to do your job? Because then I will uncover things that I never even knew. And most of the time, they are minuscule things that I can fix immediately. And so when there's those tiny things that will drive a much higher impact, you want to jump onto those things and latch on. But again, you're not always going to know those things if you don't ask your team, if you don't have conversations with them. If you are running your business as this like top-down organization where you're just like shouting from the mountaintops and like barking orders, you're going to have a very hard time. If you explain why you want to do things, if you explain why you want it to be done a certain way, if you ask for that feedback, that collaborative management is going to be so much better for your business. I can't even explain to you the night and day difference that it will have. And when you provide feedback this way, the people who care, they'll appreciate the feedback and they'll improve, and you'll see them take it and run with it. The people who don't care at all will make excuses and probably get defensive. And that's, like I said, that's how you know who to keep. Another question I get often is, how do I know if I have like high standards and this is realistic for me to expect? Am I expecting too much? Or what is micromanaging and being nitpicky? So here's my rule. If it's in the SOP, it's a standard. If you can't explain to your team why you want something done in a certain way and the impact, it's probably over the line into micromanaging. I want it done that way because I want it done that way because it's how I do it. That's not a viable answer. I want it done that way because it typically improves the performance of the post by about 10% every single time we do it. That is a standard. That makes sense. Let me give you a couple examples from us, okay? A standard is all client content must go through quality control before it's sent to the client. We do this because it ensures quality, protects our reputation, and increases the performance of the content. Micromanaging would be like, I don't like the font you used in that graphic. You need to change it, especially if the font wasn't specified in the SOP and it doesn't impact the outcome. That's nitpicky. Okay. A standard is all sales calls must be recorded and they must be linked to that lead within 24 hours so that I can review and give feedback to improve. Micromanaging is you need to ask questions in this exact order. Unless there's like a strategic reason for the order, you're just controlling for control's sake. I want you to check yourself. If you're about to give feedback, ask yourself, can I explain why this matters and the impact if it's not done this way? If the answer is yes, great, it's a standard. If not, you're probably micromanaging. So when do you fire someone? When is it time to, I was going to say pull the trigger, but that feels really in poor taste. When is it time to let someone go? The old me would give people chance after chance after chance, and I would make excuses for them, and I would blame myself. I read Extreme Ownership when I was in high school, and that book was not healthy for me. I took it way too far. And honestly, I still do at times. But now I recognize, like I said, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And if it's a maybe, it's a no. And I stop giving chances when I have documented the issue, over communicated what needs to change, held them accountable, gotten verbal confirmation that they understand what to do, how to do it, and why, and they still don't meet the standards. And I move a lot quicker to fire people than I did before because I now have that framework for myself. I've decided this framework is fair. This gives people a viable opportunity to make improvements. And because I have set that standard with myself, I now have to raise my standards. I have to maintain those standards and let people go when they're not a fit. Every single day that you keep somebody who is not a fit for your business is a day that you are not finding somebody who is. It's a day that your good team members are picking up the slack and getting frustrated. Fire fast, hire slow. I'm going to hold your hand when I say this. That team member that is a little snippy in the support emails that they send for your membership. That person who takes a little bit longer than they needed to check off that task that you assigned to them. They're costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars because if they're client facing in any way, the things that irk you just a little bit irk your clients tenfold. If you've gotten a complaint about that person, there are 10 people who feel the exact same way who just haven't had the balls to tell you. So let this be your reality check. If you're holding on to somebody, I have to have the same conversation with clients. And it's hard sometimes when it's that first team member that you hired and they've been with you for 27 years. Like that is hard, but this is the reality check that you really need. So don't hire too late. Don't hire too many people because your system sucks. If you're making 10K months and you have a team of 5, like I said, in what world? There's no way we should be doing that. We need to trim it down. We need to look at what's actually revenue generating. Sales, marketing, and client support are revenue generating. Admin and ops are not. If you're making 10K months, you don't need an ops person. You need a better system. Maybe a sales person. Let's get your systems right first. Then we can hire strategically. Do not hire an ops person just because you're overwhelmed. You don't need an ops person. You need to prioritize and systematize. Then maybe hire. Put out the biggest fire and let the rest burned. We had a client who had an ops person and a marketing person basically working against her. Dare I say, actively conspiring to bring her down. Not ideal. And they were just creating more work than they were solving. They weren't aligned with their vision. They were making decisions without her input. And then she'd have to redo everything. And not in a, oh, we've outsourced the responsibility type of way. In a, if she wants it done the way, then she can do it. Totally different. So what we did was we trimmed down her process so that, because she didn't even need those roles yet. We built out systems for the things that actually did matter, that were actually producing revenue, and we just crossed off the things that didn't. So she saved money and her sanity. And then when it was time, we then rehired for those roles with the right people and the right systems in place. It's always the ops person that low-key sucks and is making everything harder. If you're resonating with this, just let this be your sign. It's time to let them go. This isn't because ops people are bad. Most people just hire them at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. So my hiring philosophy now, first principle, hire for the system, not to save you. I used to hire because I was overwhelmed and I felt like I needed someone to save me. And now I hire someone to run a system that I've already built. If the system doesn't exist yet, I'm not ready to hire. Second principle is track record over potential. I used to hire for potential. I see so much potential in them. They're going to be so great. I hire for track record now. Show me what you've done. Show me the results you've gotten. Show me how you operate. Potential is wonderful, but proven ability, much better. Number 3, culture and vision are just as important as talent. I used to think if they're skilled, we can make it work. I don't care how skilled you are if you are not aligned with where we're going and how we operate. I would rather hire somebody who's 80% skilled and 100% aligned than somebody who's 100% skilled and 50% aligned. Skills can be developed. Personality, you're stuck with that. Principle 4, raise your standards. I say this to myself all the time. I don't expect my team to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. And therefore, when I need to set a boundary or set a standard and hold them to it, I am within my rights to do that. Same goes for clients. I don't accept mediocrity, and I do not expect my team or my clients to do anything that I would not do myself. And if it's in the SOP, it's a standard. If you can't meet the standard, you can't work here. And I communicate this from day one. This is what we're building. Here's the standard. Here's what success looks like. Are you able to do that? If they're not, that's totally fine. But I'm not going to lower my standard just to keep them. 5th principle, fire fast, hire slow. I would give people chance after chance after chance, and I would hold on to them way too long because I didn't want to be the bad guy. It's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. If I'm questioning whether to keep someone, then they're already gone in my mind. I just have to have the conversation. Every day I keep someone who's not a fit is a day I'm not finding someone who is. So here's what I would tell you if you are about to make these hires. Here's what I want you to ask yourself. Do I have a system in place for this role? If not, do not hire yet. Build the system first. I know that sounds very scary and overwhelming. It will not take you that long. Buckle down and do it. Number 2, can I explain what success looks like in this role? If you cannot define success, if you can't measure it, you cannot manage it. Also ask yourself, do I have 5 to 10 hours a week to invest in training and managing this person for the first month? If you do not, you are also not ready. 4th question to ask yourself, am I hiring for a role my business is already doing, or am I hiring to try and expand? If it's the latter, do not hire yet. Start it yourself first, build a system, even if it's a crappy system, and then hire somebody to run it. Last question, am I hiring because I'm overwhelmed, or am I hiring strategically? If you're overwhelmed, you probably need to prioritize and systematize, not hire. Please take it from me. I made these $700,000 plus worth of mistakes. You don't have to. Most of the time, I can promise you, you do not need a new team member. You need a better, cleaner system. And when you do hire slow, vet them thoroughly, test their work, check their references, hire for track record, not potential. Hire for culture fit, not just talent. And once you do hire, and honestly, in all areas of your life, raise your standards, give feedback, hold them accountable. The people who care will appreciate it and they will improve. And the people who don't care will make excuses and leave. One of my team members actively goes out of her way to get feedback from me. In fact, she says that it gives her anxiety when I don't give her feedback because then she doesn't know how she's doing. So like I said, the people who care, they want the feedback. They will appreciate it. They will take it and run with it. If you're met with excuses, then they can leave. And that's how you build a team that actually works. So I spilled a little tea here. As always, if your marketing is not consistent or you know that you could be making a lot more money, if you're reaching 100,000 people a month and you're not generating the revenue that you want to be, book that free content audit. It's in the show notes. People tell me often that they get more in that free audit than they received in 15, 20, $30,000 programs. And we stand by that audit. There is so much value in there. So that's all for this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.